If you've seen the hit Netflix show Beef, then you'll remember this scene. But to make that scene work, the editors had to do this.
And what really got Steven over the top was when the churchgoers started singing, and he started singing, like belting it out. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then I talked to Jake, the director, and he's like, okay, we can't show any singing. I'm like, oh boy, okay, that changes things.
So how did they make that scene hit with such limited coverage? On today's episode, we're finding out. We sat down with Emmy-winning editors Nat Fuller and Jordan Kim as they break down their brilliant work on Netflix's Beef. How they take the emotion in the scene we just saw and flip it to this.
Come on, everybody, let's praise the Lord! Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Nat and Jordan revealed their advanced editing concepts, like the butterfly effect in editing, and how to create an anti-hero that an audience can actually root for.
George, I'm a bad person. I've tried to hide that from you.
I want a divorce.
For me, I pretty much never binge shows, but I watched the first episode, was hooked, binged the entire thing immediately. And that is extremely rare for me. That's like never happened. And so why do you think that was? Why was it so binge worthy?
I think it was designed that way. I think we had that in mind where we wanted to have the bingeability factor. And I think it being a Netflix show, there was a little bit of, we would make jokes about the algorithm and making sure that people are going to hit next. We'd move some things around just to make sure, again, like, so that we were hitting the quote unquote, the algorithm, making sure that it was very leaving on a cliffhanger. I think by the time you get through episode 1.
Hey, thanks again for everything. We should exchange numbers and keep
I'm
in
late for an
touch.
appointment right now, so I gotta go. Bye.
The way that the show was edited was part of the process of making sure that hit the audience with something that maybe they weren't expecting, even if they're like, oh, I know this is going to happen. You just peed all over the floor. When they're laughing and they're smiling and running away. You're kind of hooked, and so you want to see what happens next.
But at that final frame, she smiles. And that made me go, oh, come on. All right, and I have to immediately hit next.
We also tried to make sure that we were blasting off into the next episode. From episode 1 to episode 2, she burst through the door.
Shit! Bitch-ass handyman pissing on my fucking hardwood floor!
So it kind of ran through together very well. So the energy is always kind of at the beginning and the end. We were very cognizant of making sure that people were going to be wanting to continue from one episode to the next.
There's another one where at the end of episode 5, you've got the guys breaking into the house, and then Umi ends up falling down the stairs.
Such a lonely day, and it's my guest
If you go to the next episode to kind of getting taken to the hospital, right?
Fumi, we're here for you.
Thank you, Amy.
At the end of episode 8, you've got Danny, unintentionally kidnapping June. It's kind of spiraling out of control in these ways and affecting other people outside of the orbit of the main characters.
Danny took her. I can't find her.
Wait, what?
He came in and knocked me out, and when I woke up, she was gone.
It's kind of, that's a trope, but it's true. We want people to continue to watch. And how do we hook the audience and get that bingeability that kind of goes hand in hand with Netflix shows, I think. And so, yeah, I guess it worked because, we get people hooked on it. But yeah, we definitely we're catering to that for sure.
There's also an interesting structure too, towards the later half of the season.
Amazing
where things kind of reset to a new normal, right? And you think maybe everything's okay.
Amazing grace. Come on, everybody, let's praise the Lord!
could easily just be ramping up more and more and more and more the whole time. But I think the fact that there is this plateau and towards the end, I guess, made for an interesting kind of like rug pull situation. And then the shit hits the fan and it just ratchets up to a whole other level, which I thought structurally was a really interesting choice.
That moment kind of made me feel like it was a season 2.
Right.
I did get a really interesting emotional reset, because I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges with bingeable shows, where if it's kind of the same emotion or same tension rising for this many episodes, that gets exhausting and ultimately probably unsatisfying. So the fact that you did just skip 8 months ahead kind of re-engaged me to want to keep on watching.
This video was recorded by Riverside, the all-in-one video podcasting studio. Y'all know, we've been with Riverside for over a year now, and that's just because they keep adding amazing value to their product. Now they just released a new feature where you can use your phone as your webcam when you're podcasting. What? For a lot of us creators, if you didn't know, your phone is actually probably the best camera you can get, and now we can use it so seamlessly whether we're a guest or we're hosting a podcast. Or if you're on the road, you're traveling, you don't want to bring your whole camera gear setup, it's a lot. All you have to do is have your camera gear set up in your pocket. Easy peasy. I can now get that Riverside 4K resolution right from my phone, no problem. All you have to do is download the Riverside app on your phone, and then you go to the Riverside Studio on your laptop, and on your video input, you select connect to mobile cam. You'll get a QR code, you scan it, and there you go. Now we have a mobile webcam. And on top of this, you still get all of Riverside's amazing features, just like their AI enhanced video editor. Riverside has made it incredibly simple for your guests to have top-notch video quality, as well as make traveling and just creating content easier. So go ahead, sign up to Riverside for free, and if you want to use the paid version, use code editingpodcast for 15% off. Let's get back to the interview.
So I'm super curious about, because you talked about Nat, there was a few, like you followed the script pretty closely, but then there's a few editing decisions you had to make to really hone it in and get it to that final point. Like what decisions, either at the beginning or at the end of episodes, did you have to make editorially to make it work?
The one that I could speak to was episode 3 when Danny is playing the Incubus cover. That used to be just like, before it was just, it was just one scene happened and then the next one happened and then the next one happened. George, he's doing his thing in the bathroom, the X-rated thing, to Mia's photo. Amy and Paul have their kiss. It was very like structurally like this happens, this happens, this happens. And it was very linear in that sense. We showed the episode to Netflix and they were like, oh, well, we want a little bit more of a punch out of the episode. So what we decided to do was turn it into a little bit of a montage where Danny starts playing. You don't even hear that it's him, and then you're seeing all these moments happen over montage, over the music, kind of tied everything together, but it also gave it a little bit more of a like you're like watching it from above rather than being in the moment. So I thought that was really cool. And then, yeah, we also tried a couple, like we had to do a couple of tricks editorially, like the kiss was very short. That kiss was like a peck. It was like real short. If you watch the episode again, what you'll see is he goes in and kisses her, and we cut. And then we go into George and everybody, and then we come back, and then their kiss releases. We use that whole moment of their kiss to show George, to show the other characters having their moments while this is also happening to Amy. And that was definitely manufactured in the cutting room. And again, I think it just really works well, like showing the action happening while the music's doing it. And then you come at the end and you see, oh, it's Danny singing.
Lately, I'm beginning to find that
That was something that happened editorially where then it was on the page.
That reveal when Danny is singing is like so satisfying. It's so like, okay, Danny, I see you.
Not many people talk about is the fact that at the end of this episode, yes, he's joined the church, he's singing with the church as well. But just before, it was also revealed that he intends to scam the church. So fascinating to me of like, we're having such an emotional breakthrough. We have massive empathy towards him. And then he, at the end, he's still a bit of an arsehole, but I'm rooting for him. It's like, you put it into context, he's about to scam the church, and I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do this. How were you able to take us through that journey of us essentially still rooting for the arsehole?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question, because Jake and I and Laura always had debates about like, we're like, Danny's a real, like, he's kind of a piece of shit. And again, it goes to the directing and the writing. Jake's mentality was like, no, it's like, he is our hero. He is like the person that we are rooting for. And he's right, he's right in a way, but he is very sometimes hard to root for, and his decisions are very cringeworthy. So I think the key is really just like the relatability of like being in that position of being desperate or feeling like you're low, you're down and out.
Nobody
understands. And when I'm dead, you will see. You will fucking see.
And I think that kind of wanting him to get a victory somewhere. You want Danny to get a W, and like when he does, you're like, yeah.
It's a lot, but we have been talking about taking out a loan for renovations. That's the only way we can keep up with these mega churches.
Right. I mean, it is an investment, for sure.
So I was thinking for next week.
But at the same time, you're right. It's like he's not a good guy, and he's done a lot of very bad things. But I think that also drives the rooting for him, because it's like you want him to be better. You want him to make the better decision. And it's almost like, I've said this before, it's like you feel like he's one of your kids. Like he's like, I still love you, but man, you really gotta do better next time. Come on.
That's a good comparison.
A lot of it goes to the quality of the performance of Steven and the vulnerability that he brings to that role, that even if he doesn't do things that we would necessarily do, that there's a vulnerability at times that you can see how much he's like hurting or feeling like there's something missing in his life, that this whole situation is filling that void, and the void being a present like character in the story throughout for a lot of the characters.
How are you thinking about that when you're like putting together the first edit of a scene and you're like, okay, we have to empathize with Danny, with Steven's character. Is there anything that goes through your mind, or does it kind of write itself?
I think sometimes it's like really keeping an eye on when to stay on a character when someone else is talking.
My mom said that I should hear you out. She said that you were just messing with that kid online. I want to clear the air and put this all behind us.
And just be with the person that we want to like see the wheels turning in their head as information is presented to them, right? This show has a lot more clean singles than a lot of shows that I've worked on before, to the idea of subjectivity and feeling like you're really with the character, because you don't even have the over the shoulder where you're seeing physically the other person that they're communicating with. Then when they're really a clean like close-up single with them, you really feel like you're with them. It really gives that sense of subjectivity, I feel.
I think honestly the next scene that we want to talk about is a really great example. So we do want to talk about the divorce monologue.
But I'm gonna get it back. I will. I'm gonna talk to Jordan. I'm gonna come clean to Naomi and the neighbor. I want to make everything right.
In this scene, we're playing a lot with the like evolving dynamics of the intimacy between the characters. You know, this is a moment where confessing things that we as the audience know have been going on.
I want to make everything right.
So you cheated on me? Because of your road rage?
So we get a clean kind of like wider single, and she's on her own here. It really very much feels like the spotlight is on her to like explain herself, right? And then when we go to George,
I actually felt better yesterday when it was just the affair.
George is in a over the shoulder. A lot of this scene evolves from distance between them. She's trying to plead her case and save her family. And then we get closer in.
You let me be friends with him.
Now we're into these overs where we're trying to connect the two characters more. They're not as separated.
You let me invite him to our home.
And we're trying to set up this expectation that something to be reconciled or to be understood between the two of them.
Deranged Korean handyman.
Well, he didn't seem that dangerous at the time. I don't know how to explain it.
My mom was hospitalized, Amy. And you still doubled down. You put June in danger.
Trying to find the right pacing to let Amy sit in her choices.
You had so many opportunities to tell me.
I know.
And the fact that we're like getting closer and closer in on the two of them makes it feel like maybe there is this chance for them. There was a version that we did at one point where we had an extreme close-up on Amy.
George, I'm a bad person.
So that was the shot that at one point we had an extreme close-up on her.
I've tried to hide that from you because you're not.
Where her performance was a lot more intense, actually. It was much more tears streaming down her face, much more nakedly, you know, like feeling the moment. And I think the choice to pull back a little bit is part of what we've been talking about like modulating that tone, right, of the drama, the comedy, everything, to really find the balance of all of that, where it's maybe really picking and choosing our moments to lean in hard to certain emotions. And yeah, there's a minimalism to the scene, I think, that really, really works to let the emotions sing. And you can see the close-up in this scene at the very end of the scene. The character wrestling with the ramifications of what they've done, and then really just sitting with her in that subjective single, really feeling her feelings and thinking about the ramifications of, it seems like it's completely off the rails now as far as she knows. And that goes back to the structure earlier of the greater picture of the relationship with George here.
You're as good as it gets. That's why I fell in love with you.
I want a divorce.
Also very deliberate pacing there in how long we wait for his line to, we sit in that for a bit. I think it's really just a matter of adding so much time that it feels uncomfortable. Like seeing how far you can push it.
That's why I fell in love with you.
I want a divorce.
Extending it to the point where it felt like it was almost too long. In a micro sense, it felt too long, but in a macro sense, it felt right. And you had to watch it in that like wider context to get a sense of if it was working. The pacing is so deliberate that you really have to watch back with so much context. The context is so much more important, and you have to just give yourself so much more time to see if it's playing out in the way you really just need to let things play out and watch it from so much earlier to get a sense of these like small changes if it's like rippling through to give the effect that you want.
I want a divorce.
It's the butterfly effect. One line here a minute ago is going to inform how this moment of silence is also going to make this work. And you're right, it's just context to earn the pause, I would say.
Because if you're just watching it, just that scene by itself, isolated, it's like, oh shoot, this is dragging on. I've watched this 300 times. It's taking forever.
Or just adding air within the first few seconds before and after, or like, even like 10 seconds before and after. It just felt like it was hard to tell if it was working. So we just had to watch the whole scene all the way through a lot of times,
Why was the pacing of this scene so important to get that, but it also still be relatively efficient?
I think it's like we were talking about with the dynamic range of pacing in this show. This is one of those scenes that it really felt like it needed to feel like you're sitting with the characters, and it needed to feel like almost like a feature length kind of pacing where you're letting these emotional beats and the back and forth of the characters wrestling with these issues really breathe, give them their time. And it's not something that I see very often, that kind of pacing in a show that is ostensibly half hour. But I think that it was just the key was like giving us time with these characters and letting it feel like it's playing out in real time as close as possible, while not actually being real time, and so that is one of the tricks oftentimes with editing, I feel, is making moments feel long or feel earned without actually being the time that it would take for it to happen, and it's about the compression and extension of how you let things breathe and contrast and when you're like punctuating something to help with that flow.
A quick side note of all of this, it's actually kind of cathartic for me to be hearing all of this because the documentary that I was just working on, I threw in a lot of those smaller, more silent moments. And when the director kept on watching it, he was watching those moments more isolated. And he was like, cut this out. It's too long. Cut this out. It's not going to work. And for me, I kept on pushing back of like, well, I've earned it because of something that I did a minute ago. And he couldn't quite get it. And so the director was kept on putting the pressure, cut it out, cut it out, cut it out. And so what I did is I then had him watch, just for that one moment, I made him watch the entire documentary, its full context. And he did not want to, because this thing is like 30 minutes at this point. I made him watch the entire thing. And then when that moment of silence that was so important for me and it finally happened, he looked at me and went, all right, I get it now. We're keeping it. I love it.
I feel like if you have a good relationship with the director and, you know, you have the kind of like experience to back it up and you feel really passionately about something, those big swings, people appreciate that. When you feel really strongly like you're going to watch this whole thing and you're going to agree with me, like people respond to that. I think that you're telling him this for a reason, you know.
Have you ever been editing and you have this temp track and it may or may not be from a super popular artist and it's going to cost $1 million to license it, so you have to replace it and it's the worst and you want to die? Yeah, it's happened to me. But guess what? MusicBed just came out with an AI-powered tool that will help you find a song with the exact same vibe that you can license. All you have to do is go onto MusicBed's website and search their new Search by Song feature. And let's say I want something super cinematic, a Hans Zimmer type score for my edit. Let's check it out. Bruh, this part right here, this is what I'm talking about. This is that grand, epic score that Hans Zimmer is so well known for. And I can actually license this thanks to MusicBed's AI. With MusicBed's AI, you're gonna save a ton of time being able to use a reference track to find something that's gonna be perfect for your edit. And with MusicBed, you get the highest level of curation possible. They only let in 1% of the music. So switch to MusicBed today and get the best music out there that's only on MusicBed. Click the link in the description to get a 14-day free trial right now. Back to the conversation.
I'm definitely curious with it seems to be quite a few editing and storytelling philosophies that were kind of rule set into making the show. What other, let's just say, rules or ideas or philosophies that were important to help develop the identity of the show and to develop the identity of the editing language?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really kind of came down to a balance of the humor and the drama and the comedy, and like finding the tonal balance so that we don't ever delve too far into one direction. We're always kind of like, we at any moment, like this thing could become very heavy or dramatic or funny. You could be laughing at one moment and then the next moment you're feeling very upset, or, you know, things kind of keep you on your toes. So I think keeping that in balance in the way that the show was edited was part of the process of making sure that we could kind of keep our options open and like hit the audience with something that maybe they weren't expecting, even if they're like, oh, I know this is going to happen. And you're like, are you sure? Are you sure you thought that George or that Paul was going to kiss Amy? Like, when I read that in the script, I'm like, what? Like, there's no way. But then after that happens, you're like, okay, now you're on the ride, and you're like, okay, let's see how we're going to play this. And it becomes kind of like this cat and mouse game where they're hiding and she's kissing, and it just, so you have this moment of fun, but then it becomes something very serious where Paul tells George, and like it destroys Amy's life. So keeping you on your toes, like keeping all the options open, I think was part of at least the way I approached it. I always wanted to make sure that they like at any given moment, like you could be turning left or right.
There was that overarching sort of tension of an unpredictability towards it. I didn't know what direction this show was going to turn. So like, how was that always something you were looking for? Of like, I was always uncertain where this was going to go, and how did you make that feeling?
I think it was just the way that I would look at it is just the variety that was in the performance was something that I would rely on, where I would always be looking for something that maybe was like a little bit kind of loaded in a way where one of my scenes that I'm thinking of right now is when Edwin comes to in episode 7, Edwin comes to ask for a job from Danny, and Danny's just like sitting there like looking at him, talking to him, and like it almost like had a Godfather vibe where, you know, he had this smile on his face, but underneath it you're like, he's seething, and he's like, he doesn't like Edwin. So, but he's also smiling and pretending to be like nicer than he is. So I think just using the performances that were given, and Amy does this a lot, where there's just like this underneath the surface is something completely different than what she's outputting. And that happened a lot when she's speaking to her psychiatrist or psychologist. So yeah, leaning into those performances and like using that kind of under the surface like dichotomy that the performances gave, I think gave a lot of subtext and a lot of kind of you're getting two things happening at once. You're learning a lot about the characters, but you're also like seeing below in kind of what their true intentions are.
I think just to kind of go back to what Nat was saying and just agree with him. Like one of the tonal references that was discussed very early on was The Sopranos, and I feel like in both cases it's really finding the delicate balance of the humor and the darkness and the drama, and never like veering too far in one direction, or when you do, having it be very purposeful and intentional. So I really think like the key to the formula of Beef is that balance, and then also the audience, like subverting audience expectations, and that goes back to the structure like we were talking about earlier of what's going to happen with Paul. You might think in a traditional version of this story, it's going to be all about Danny and Amy like falling in love and overcoming their odds, to the rivalry, to have some other thing bloom. And, maybe something does bloom by the end, but it's definitely not a traditional romance. It's like almost like you guys were saying, becoming two halves of one organism, one person, two different sides of a coin. And so I think what was really well done from my perspective in the writing was making it feel very organic and very inevitable, but not at all something that I was ahead of as a viewer or a reader with the early scripts that we got. It always felt like it was subverting what I was expecting, but it felt organic to the story that they were telling.
So how did working on this show change your perspective as an editor, develop you professionally? What did you learn from working on Beef?
So I think working on Beef was a valuable experience for me as far as hitting all of the different emotional beats and kind of having, because like I always say, like I feel so lucky to work on the show because I always enjoy shows that have everything. They have the comedy, the drama, the humor, the emotional aspects. So in the action too. So this show just had every element, and I think having it structured out this way was such a pleasure to work on. And so I think it just kind of made me really value the project as itself, and then also as an editor, like just really milking it and like taking advantage of the opportunities and the good acting and the good directing, and just really, making the most out of it and doing my part in communicating that with the director and with Sonny, the showrunner, and having a very good, solid, collaborative experience, because working with Jordan and Laura and Harry, like it was such a collaborative effort, and we were all open to each other's ideas. We were all kicking each other's ideas off each other. Jordan was making these incredible comps for the phones, and we were all working together. So, a kumbaya thing. It was just like, it was such a great experience working with everybody, and like to have the result of this show that has these emotional highs and lows and these funny moments and these dramatic moments. Just taking advantage of that and, putting your best effort in to like get the most out of each scene.
I agree so much with what Nat said, and I feel like getting to work with such a talented post team, and getting to work with Jake and Hikari and Sonny that really were aiming to make something special and at a level that was new for me. The pacing wise, like I mentioned, it was really interesting to kind of work in a style that was so dynamic, like we were saying, like where we had the time to let things breathe in a way that, as I say, coming from more straight ahead comedy, was very refreshing and is kind of more in line with the tone of things that I would want to make myself. So I think like blending those tones of the comedy and drama, the very unique kind of mix of everything that we got, the stew, is a world that I find really compelling. And even just like on a personal note, the fact that we're depicting a culture that I feel very close to. I got to edit scenes in Korean for the first time and use some of my background in that way, and I felt very personally invested in that, and was so proud to be a part of something like that. Similar to how I felt when I saw Parasite, where I'm like, dang, I'm like proud to be Korean. Like watching this is so awesome. and just like showing that these stories have an audience in a way that, you know, there's K-dramas obviously, but like Korean American stories and Asian American stories that can be very specific yet universal, I think was something that I really took away from the show.
And I want to say before we go, I just want to say thank you to my assistant Ryan Rombach, who and all of our post team, they were just incredible. Ryan he's far and away just the dedicated, really great assistant. And as to answer your guys' question of like how do you get started in this, like it all starts from the bottom, and the not the bottom, but like that level of assistant work. We rely on them so much. They do so much for us, and I just want to give like the due respect to him, because he really held it all together. He was the last man standing, and the assistants they are our backbone for sure.
Agree, for sure. Same with my assistant Josh and Josh Stein and Lily, who is Laura's assistant. All incredible editors in their own right. All incorporated incredible ideas of their own that just made everything go super super well. And I do feel like if you find the right collaborators, regardless of the project, I think the hardest work is finding the people that you connect with and just making things together on whatever level you have the means to. I feel if the passion is there and the chemistry is there between the collaborators, that something will come out of it.
Me and Jordan definitely been in the web media space, and the more and more I've been learning about the traditional space, it's like, it's even for me, it's I've been looking into that career path now as well, moving on from web media. And so like, for me, that affirms to me, assistant editing is like the next path for me for that on that. So all of this is great. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. It's always such a pleasure to just nerd out about those invisible details and then like making them visible. And so now the biggest curse of this show now is when I rewatch this, I now can't unsee it.